So King Solomon ruled, 1 Kings chapter 4. So King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these are his chief officials. Azariah, son of Zadok, the priest. We saw about Zadok earlier, so apparently he didn't last too long before his son became priest. But you have to remember, this list covers all of Solomon's reign. So this author is kind of picking and choosing a representative list of Solomon's entire 40-year-long reign. So Zadok was the priest when Solomon started reigning, but Azariah may have been the priest of the bulk of Solomon's reign. El-Hareph and Ahijah, sons of Shishah, secretaries. Those are pretty much just the writers. But writing literacy would have still been a very rare skill at this point. And so the secretaries are pretty much just the writers at this point in time. Jehoshaphat, or scribes maybe, Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, recorder. He would be more like the historian. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, commander-in-chief. Zadok and Abiathar, priests, although Abiathar has been deposed already. Azariah, son of Nathan, I don't know if that's Nathan the prophet or some other Nathan, probably some other Nathan, in charge of the district officers. Zabud, son of Nathan, a priest and personal advisor to the king. Ahishar, in charge of the palace. Adoniram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. Solomon also had 12 district governors over all Israel, who supplied provisions to the king and the royal household. So they extracted taxes from the people, in other words. Taxes in the form of goods. Not necessarily money, but goods. Each one had to provide supplies for 1 month of the year. These are their names. Ben-Hur, in the hill country of Ephraim. Ben-Decker, and Makaz, Shalbim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon Bethanan. Ben-Hesed, and Arabah, Soka, and all the land of Hepher were his. By the way, Ben, when you see all these Bens here, Ben means son. So Ben-Abinadab means son of Abinadab. Ben-Hur means son of Hur. Okay. Ben-Abinadab, or son of Abinadab, and Nathan Dor, he was married to Taphath, daughter of Solomon. He was married to one of Solomon's daughters. Bana, son of Ahilud, and Tanak, and Megiddo, and all Beth-Shan next to Zarephath below Jezreel, from Beth-Shan to Abel Nohala, across the Jokneam. Ben-Geber and Ramoth Gilead. The settlements of Jair, son of Manasseh, and Gilead were his, as well as the district of Argob and Bashan, and its 60 large walled cities with bronze gate bars. Ahinadab, son of Edo, and Mahanaim, Ahamaiz, and Naphtali. He had married Basemath, another daughter of Solomon. Bana, son of Hushai, and Asher, and Elioth. Jehoshaphat, son of Paruah, and Issachar. Shimei, son of Elah, and Benjamin. Geber, son of Uri, and Gilead, the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the country of Og, king of Bashan. That's the land east of the Jordan River. He was the only governor over that district. There was nobody in Judah, by the way. Judah, which is Solomon's own tribe, didn't have to provide taxes for the king, or provisions for the king. That's one of the advantages of having your own tribesman be king. The people of Judah and Israel, so again, there's a subtle distinction there, were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And they ate, they drank, and they were happy. And Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms, from the river Euphrates to the land of the Philistines. That's on the east coast, that's on the coast of the west coast and the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as the border of Egypt down to the south. That's their entire borders, by the way. They've gotten all the land that God ever promised to give them, and more, by the way, because God didn't even promise to give them the land east of the Jordan. So they've gotten all the land that God promised to give them. These countries brought tribute and were Solomon's subjects all his life. Solomon's daily provisions. Now, there's going to be a lot of units of measurement here, which I'm just going to read as the text presents them. I am in no way qualified to tell you exactly how many units of measurements these were, taking their units of measurements and translating them into ours. I have no idea. Okay? Frankly, I'm not sure if anybody does. But this is just what we have. This is what I have written here, so this is what I'm going to read. Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of fine flour, and 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. For he ruled over all the kingdoms west of the river, that's the river Euphrates, from Tisah to Gaza, and had peace on all sides. During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, again, there's a subtle distinction there, from Dan to Beersheba, that's from north to south. Remember how the Danites, the tribe of Dan, were supposed to live in a little slice of land on the coast of the Mediterranean, but they never could quite take that land, so they went north instead? We read about that at the end of Judges. That happened very early in their history. So they're at the very northern end of the Promised Land, and Beersheba is down at the very southern end. So saying from Dan to Beersheba means from north to south, and everywhere in between. So from Dan to Beersheba, during Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, from north to south, lived in safety, each a man under his own vine and fig tree. So everybody has what they need. Everybody has their needs filled. Everybody has his own food, his own resources, and they have peace and safety on all sides. Solomon had 4,000 stalls with chariot horses and 12,000 horses. The district officers, each in his month, supplied provisions for King Solomon and all who came to the king's table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also brought to the proper place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and the other horses. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand of the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the men of the east, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than any other man, including Ethan the Ezrahite, whoever that guy was, wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. These guys must have been pretty famous, and Solomon was more famous than them. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described, we only have one of those left, by the way. Now, I guess the book of Proverbs are his proverbs, or at least some of them, I don't know. Of all of his songs, though, unless we count a couple of psalms that have his name on them, the one we have left is his Song of Songs, which is a whole book in the Bible. He described plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. It makes you wonder how much of our knowledge of the world entered the world through Solomon, huh? He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. We're going to read an example of this later with a lady leader. The Queen of Sheba. We're going to read a specific example of this happening later on. But apparently it was just a regular occurrence, a thing that just occurred regularly during this time. We're not done talking about Solomon's greatness. We have more of accounts of that later on. But you can see how this is the 900s BC here. And you can see how for the next 900 years plus after Solomon's death and the fall of the kingdom, every Israelite, every Jew born would look back at this time when they were the big kids on the block and everyone in the world came to pay attention to them and wish that could happen again. So when Jesus was born, and when the apostles, and they're going through their ministry, Jesus is going through his ministry, and then later on the church goes through its ministry, like that's the mindset they're talking to. And Jesus in particular is talking to the Jews of the 30s AD. He's talking to people who have the mindset and have had it for 900 plus years of, they want to go back to when they were the big kids on the block and all the nations of the world came to pay tribute to them. That's what they want to go back to. And that's what they expect their Messiah figure to bring them back to. So that when we read about the kingdom message that Jesus is speaking, and even the prophets predict in the centuries before that, you have to remember that when the people hear that, that's not necessarily what the prophets mean, and it's not what Jesus means, per se, okay? But when the people hear it, this is what they hear. They hear about this great kingdom that David built and Solomon ruled over, and they want to go back to that. And so just keep that in mind when we read about the prophets predicting the return of this great kingdom, and Jesus talking about inaugurating this great kingdom. That's what those people are hearing.